I went from filing project folders as an intern to a senior engineer working at one of Australia's biggest energy companies in under 3 years. And in that time, I've watched dozens of talented people walk into their first energy role thinking they'd finally made it, only to quit within 12 months. Not because they weren't smart enough or couldn't do the work, but because nobody warned them about the 3 brutal realities of entry-level energy careers. So if you're serious about building a career in energy, regardless of your progress, the next 10 minutes could save you years of frustration. Preparing for a career in energy consumes years of your life, whether that's time spent studying engineering, an economics degree focused on energy markets, or even transitioning domain knowledge from tech or finance into energy because you believe in the energy transition. The through line is that you understand the technical concepts, know the industry is primed to boom, and that you want to be a part of it. Then you walk into your first energy company and reality hits. You're updating someone else's Excel spreadsheet, sitting in meetings where you say nothing because you don't know your place in internal politics yet, and doing administrative work that feels completely disconnected from the exciting energy work you were promised in uni. Somewhere around week 3, a thought starts creeping in. You begin questioning, is this actually what I signed up for? But don't worry, this is normal. The doubt isn't because you've made a mistake, it's an intentional byproduct of all industries. Whilst at the surface level, energy companies invest in entry-level talent to support their future growth. Subconsciously, they're investing in this talent because it's the lowest cost and highest upside way to get cheap labor to complete rudimental work required for the transition. Although that's slightly cynical, this is the fundamental economics of how large engineering organizations staff their work, and a trade-off most engineers are willing to enter into. As an engineer, you get in at the ground floor of the industry and get paid to learn the practical industry skills that traditional education can't provide you. And in turn, the organization gets skilled labor at the fraction of the price of a specialist engineer. Naturally, the work that you get handed is not the sexy energy work that you did at uni. It's the grunt work that needs to be done to support the broader operations of the company. It's important to understand that this isn't the flaw in the system or something that the educational system failed to mention. It's purely a risk management strategy on behalf of the organization. They're simply not going to hand a $50 million project to someone who graduated just 8 months ago. But the engineers who quit in their first 12 months in industry are almost always the ones who interpreted this situation as the ceiling, not the floor. At this point, I'll promise you that if you can push through, that it will get better. But that's easier said than done. And it's much easier to do if you know it's where you belong. Whether you're in this situation and want reassurance, or new to the industry and searching for where you fit, finding the slice of energy that suits you best is key. I solved that exact problem with the Energy Pathways quiz, which you can take completely free by clicking the top link in the description and get your personalized pathway to the energy sector in less than 90 seconds. Because regardless of the grades you're able to achieve in school, everyone falls victim to this at some point in their career, and I was no exception. In my first energy role, I spent the quiet weeks around Christmas filing project folders to support the transition from paginated storage to online. And I won't pretend I didn't begin asking myself, did I really go through 18 years of school to end up doing this? But I stuck to it, and I was very soon glad that I did. Because at the bottom of one of those hundreds of drawers I emptied, I found a protection textbook from 1995, written by the stalwarts of the industry. And over the next week, I spent my spare time studying it. And by the end of that week, I found myself being able to engage with the engineers on my project more naturally, asking better questions, following technical conversations properly for the first time in my internship. And that led ultimately to more meaningful work, a transition to the technical side of energy, and ultimately toward the career trajectory I am on now. All of that from a filing task over Christmas. So when you find yourself in a similar situation, how do you make sure you rise to the occasion in hopes of finding your rendition of that protection textbook? First, treat every seemingly rudimentary task as an opportunity to learn. The filing, the data entry, the meeting minutes. There's context buried in all of it that your peers overlook and that you can use to get ahead. Second, read everything that crosses your desk. The faster you can accumulate an understanding of the industry, the faster you can start creating value and moving out of this position. And third, use what you've learned to ask better questions of the people people around you. Being able to introduce your entry-level perspective is something that senior engineers value immensely, as it's these modern perspectives that unlock solutions to the most challenging problems. So you've made peace with the early grunt work, but there's a second truth about the industry that catches a lot of engineers off guard because it conflicts with their natural love of learning. A lot of engineers are drawn to energy because they want to apply their technical excellence to a grand problem that is the energy transition. They've spent years building toward it, and they finally find out what entry-level roles are actually centered around. Entry-level roles are deliberately designed to prioritize breadth over depth. From a company's perspective, they benefit from you gaining an overall understanding of what the whole puzzle looks like when it's put together before you take responsibility for designing a specific piece, because it results in less isolated decisions and therefore a more coherent business. To do this, whether an internship, grad program, or full-time role, they commonly expose you to business as usual or BAU work across a range of functions of the business. For internships that are generally limited to placements in one team for 12 weeks, the objective is to give you exposure to industry. This allows you to get a taste of what practical engineering looks like in industry, while simultaneously giving the organization an opportunity to assess your suitability for future part-time, casual, or graduate employment. For grad positions that are structured as 2 to 3 years of 6-month rotations across different teams, the objective is to provide you with a general overview of business functions. For a grad role at an electricity network service provider, this could look like 6 months in network planning, 6 months in asset management, 6 months in operations, and then 6 months in a commercial or project team. For full-time engineering roles that are limited to a single team that you may or may not have already worked with as a graduate, the objective of the first few months is to rotate your responsibilities across functions of the team to give you insight into the whole scope of the team. For an operational team, you'd spend 2 weeks learning the BAU responsibilities with real-time members, 2 weeks managing the overarching work streams under the program managers, and 2 weeks working on different projects under the technical specialists. For some people, this approach is perfect. They aren't sure what they want yet, and this breadth-first approach helps them to figure it out. But for those who came in with a clear technical intention with their career, every movement away from that can feel like they're being pulled away from their dream. If you find yourself in this scenario as an entry-level engineer, what can you do to stay motivated? Whilst you can't wave your magic wand and change an engineering company's approach to managing entry-level talent, there are 4 things you can do to succeed despite it. First, treat every new career experience as an opportunity to learn something you didn't expect. I applied this after being disheartened with my second grad rotation because it wasn't in my list of preferences. Gave it a shot, and ultimately it turned out to be career defining. Second is to maintain relationships with all teams you get the opportunity to work in. The best way to do this is to check in on old projects you had a chance to work on, keeping you connected with the work you care about whilst you're not actively doing it. Third is to focus on building knowledge of how the company works. By far, one of the most important skills you can develop as an entry-level energy professional is understanding how the business actually operates, who talks to who and who makes the decisions. Because only by knowing that can you move fast and make a real impact when the opportunity comes your way. Now you've mastered the dynamic work environment that is natural for entry-level roles. But the final truth is what really keeps grads up at night, and you've got less control over it than you might like. A lot of energy companies take on more entry-level talent than they're able to support full-time, meaning that even if you do everything right, showing up early, asking questions, delivering quality work, a full-time role for the rest of your career is never guaranteed. Whilst this seems like a workforce forecasting problem, it's actually quite a calculated one. You see, most companies approach entry-level hires with scope to hire more engineers than they'll need long-term. Naturally, this is just a function of entry-level roles, which by title are designed for candidates with less proof that they're able to execute on the role profile. This results in more candidates churning out of the company, ultimately leaving those companies with the headcount they wanted in the first place. As an entry-level energy professional, how do you make sure, regardless of whether it's an internship, grad program, or full-time position, that you give yourself the highest priority of winning that long-term role? It's as simple as 4 steps. First, as soon as you're assigned a new role, project, or experience, zoom out and link the scope to the overall company strategy. Identify the specific segments you're contributing to and at what magnitude, therefore defining the value you're providing each time you complete that task. Second, use that value-driven insight to capture a running document of your contributions. What you worked on, what the outcome was, what you learned, and the specific value it provided the company. This is not only a great reflection piece, but becomes your value proposition for converting into that full-time role. Third, identify who is ultimately responsible for leading the task. If it's a project with a lead on your team, do everything in your power to help them succeed with it, no matter what they ask or if you know how to do it yet. Remember, you are paid to learn this stuff. And fourth, use this process to build relationships across cohorts and teams. The professional who provides value to a broader group of individuals within a company is the definition of a valuable employee. Make sure that's you. If you're able to tactically provide value to as many people as possible over time, it is absolutely unreasonable that you will not be rewarded long term. So you now know the 3 truths that most people figure out the hard way, and normally 10 years too late in their career. But these truths don't solve the real problem at hand, which is figuring out where you actually belong in this industry. Don't be one of those people who wait 10 years before seeking the answer to that question. Instead, solve it within the next 2 minutes by taking the Energy Pathways quiz. Links in the description.